And we're live. All right, we are back live. And we are here with Representative Woody Page. Woody, please join us to have a bill sponsored. We're gonna walk through of H21. Woody, I'm assuming that now that you've been elevated to the adult committee, you don't get out much.
That is correct. I was just telling Robin that I missed his Robbie Burns Day in the General Assembly. And
Yeah.
I offered to redo it for him.
You could do that at lunch or, maybe walk him back over to his, but we're gonna go around the table quickly in case you don't know any of us yet, or some of us yet. Representative Stevens from Waterbury.
Representative Lamont from Memorial Washington District.
Joe Parsons, represent Newbury, Thompson, and Groton.
Emily Krasnow, South Burlington.
Ashley Bartley, Fairfax, Georgia.
Dennis LeBounty, Linden, Sutton, Newark, Sheffield, Wheelock.
Hi, Woody.
I
I represent.
Representative Burrows, nice to see you.
I'm Elizabeth Burrows and I represent Windsor 1, which is Heartland, West Windsor, Windsor.
Maybe you two know each other. I'm Larry Labor and I ride with him periodically.
I'm Mary Howard. I represent Rutland City District 6.
Robin Chestnut Tantrum and Rutland Bennington District.
So, this is our second bill introduction of the year. So we are glad to have you, and we just want to make sure that we get a chance to hear what H21 is all about. So please welcome.
Okay. Well, thank you, Chair Stevens. For the record, my name is Woodman Page. Everybody calls me Woody, obviously. And thank you for the introduction from all the members here. And some I know and some I hope to know better in the future. So as you mentioned, this is testimony on H21, utility disconnection and landlord notification. And I'll send you my notes after. H21 was first introduced to this committee in my first term in 2019. And that time, the bill was referred to as H762. And it focused only on one requirement where the owner of a rental property would be notified any time that electrical services to the property was disconnected, and that notice to the landlord would be notified even if the tenant was the ratepayer. H762 would only be referred to this committee and no actions were taken at that time. And as I recall, Chair Stevens, you and I believe, had a conversation in which you suggested that I not simply focus on the electrical services disconnections, but also on expanding with other services in this bill. So in the 2021 session, this bill would be reintroduced as H612. And this time it went to the Committee on Energy and Technology. And I did take your advice and I expanded the bill to include services beyond electricity, to include gas, water, and sewer, in which again, the landlord would be notified. In addition, the bill's purpose was ultimately to promote safety, protect property, and provide assistance to tenants as needed. And no actions were taken by the Committee on Energy and Technology. And here we are today with H21. And this bill is the same as the previous H612 that was introduced in the 2021 session. The original idea for this bill came from a constituent that was a landlord in my hometown. The landlord had discovered that one of his tenants had recently had their utilities disconnected, and the tenant was using cans of sterno for cooking, which left unattended could have produced a fire. And the situation at its worst could have caused other tenants within the building to have lost their belongings, their home, and potentially their lives. And the landlord would also have suffered the loss of the property and its income source. I believe in most cases, landlords do their best to look after their property and their tenants And I think it's just simply good property management for a landlord to be knowledgeable about what's happening within their building, what's going on with their property. It's not just good for the property, but it's also good for the safety of all the tenants that may be housed within that facility. One further item that I had not considered in this bill was, when it was being drafted, was an issue that came to my attention just a few days ago. It was from Joanna Polsenberg from Standard, and it concerns the utility companies and how they levy charges. Generally, a tenant who owes monies to a large utility company for services rendered would be responsible for settling or closing the account. That record of non-payment would follow the tenant. That's basically for large utilities, from what I understand. It's not the case for some municipal-owned electric utilities such as Hardwick Electric or Barton Electric. And in this case, the landlord property owner would be responsible for payment of the bill and not the tenant. And ultimately, it's related to the leases that those utility companies would have on file. And I followed up on Wednesday, this past Wednesday. I spoke to members of the Vermont Public Power Supply Authority. They had a display in the card room, and they confirmed that in some cases, through leases between the power company and landlords, that this scenario was correct, depending on what utility company you were affiliated with. And this committee might want to confirm this information with a call to the Director of Public Affairs Officer, Julia Leopold, and I have her number on the listing here. So if you, in fact, you consider this bill, it's not just who's responsible for paying the utility bill, but I believe it has a great deal to do with being a good landlord, maintaining your property, and ultimately the safety of all the tenants. And that's all I have.
So is it the responsibility of the utility to notify the landlord, or is it the account holder?
Well, in my bill, I'm suggesting that the utility companies should be able to notify that landlord. It's not a requirement now that I know of. And whatever utility it is, the landlord should be notified.
Representative President?
And what would be the penalty if they did not? Well, I guess if it's on the utility to notify, then it wouldn't. But if for some reason somehow they do not get the landlord doesn't get notified, and this is happening, is it a break of lease contract or?
No, I have no penalties
Okay.
listed in the bill, and I don't even know how you would
Right.
have that. It's just probably the landlord would have maybe if it's a smaller utility, they might have some sort of connection to those individuals where they could pick up the phone and ask. But ultimately, it should be up to the public utility to notify the landlord.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Representative Chestatengel?
Thank you for this, Representative Page. I'm just a clarification. So you said that some utilities with some utilities, default payment would rest with the landlord.
Yes.
And I assume in that case, the utility has a legal obligation to notify the landlord?
Not to my knowledge, no.
Really?
Oh.
That surprises me.
Yes. So here again, I would refer to the Vermont Public Power Supply Authority or other utilities, and just check on that aspect of it.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't cover that in the initial bill, but it might be something you would.
And it's, just keeping it at a very high level, understand where there's a potential privacy issue, because like, why did you turn off the electricity? You know, or in this case that you mentioned, why would you turn off the heat? And that could be a financial question, that could be, you know, it could be anything. It could be anything support, but it is a safety issue. The temperature of the building goes down. I will say the fact that it's H21 as opposed to H6 something or H7 something, I think gives us more time over the course of a biennium to fit in testimony. You know, if we find room to take it up and hear more testimony on it, having it here earlier rather than later in the biennium will do wonders for our consideration.
Okay.
We do have. Oops, I'm sorry, Representative Burris.
Thank you. But is there a difference between a landlord and a property owner?
I don't have that distinction in the bill. I consider them both pretty much the same, but yes, there would be differences. You know, a property owner could have a property manager managing that property.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Elder and then Howard.
Have you found out whether like a utility, you know, let's just say it's VEC and the tenant's got the bill in their name, do they have the ability to find the property owner, or are they gonna need to, you know, it's just like often, you know, that information's not necessarily there. If the meter's really owned by the tenant, I'm just logistically wondering if you've kind of found out what the obstacles might be to that.
No, I do not know that, but I'm assuming that bill to the tenant for these larger utilities would follow that tenant wherever he or she would move on to. It would be in their financial record, I suppose.
Representative Howard.
I'm just curious, do you know if the utilities still have a plan on disconnections, that during the winter they will not disconnect anyone's electricity?
As far as I know, that still exists. And I would just add also, you know, in being a good landlord or property owner, if you find out that your tenant isn't paying their bills, that landlord may know of resources available to assist the tenant, which he could share with them and help that person out.
Right. And the utility company has a payment plan that they could
Absolutely.
go on. I have constituents that mentioned to me at one time that their landlord doesn't turn the heat on until November.
Right.
And it was pretty cold that October when I saw them, so thank you.
Great. Thank you, Representative Page. We're gonna have the attorney come by.
Okay.
Thank you, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet all of you.
Thank you.
Welcome. Thank you.
Committee, I asked for a walkthrough of the bills simply because not piled up with bills right now. We have the time to do it. Again, we might split in the future. We might split just like we did with 66. We might split the sponsor conversation from the walkthrough. But Maria, welcome. Maria's obviously is legislative counsel, and she's one of our special guest stars.
I'm going to come here more often.
Sure. We have donuts.
Definitely more often.
Welcome.
Thank you. Yes, Maria Royal with Legislative Council. And just because it's my first time in this committee, just by way of background, so I cover utilities, obviously, which is why I'm here today. I also cover broadband. insurance issues, basically everything that's not health insurance or labor, workers' comp, unemployment insurance, all the other insurances, and banking and securities. So kind of a broad range of subjects.
So in an insurance question, we could ask you from a property standpoint, say, you know, do we consider that banks actually own my house? And that's why they require insurance on it, or because of the mortgage or whatever?
Yes, yeah, we can jump into that, or
Not-
whether there should be insurance coverage for damage caused by disconnected utilities. Yeah, I'll do my best.
Great.
Answer all questions. So I know the bill is on your website. Do you want me to pull it up on the screen, or you want to just follow your devices, or what's easiest
listen.
for you?
Do people want it up on the screen?
I'm fine, follow. I'm good.
Okay. So, Representative Page did a terrific job explaining what the bill does. One thing that I just wanted to clarify, and I think Representative Howard, you alluded to this, the Public Utility Commission has a rule right now on disconnections, utility disconnections. So that's where you'll find the requirements or the limitations on when a service can be disconnected, not in the winter months, working out the payment plans and so on. And there is a notice provision, but it does not extend to notification of the property owner when the tenant is the ratepayer. So the proposal is basically to ask the PUC to amend its rules, so it would be through the rulemaking process. So any details that need to be worked out in terms of when the notice specifically should be provided and the form, et cetera, that would be incorporated in the existing rule. It does, as was explained, it would apply to, so the PUC has jurisdiction over natural gas, electric, private water, private wastewater services, large wastewater services, also telecom, but this doesn't cover telecom or cable. So, but it would apply to all of those services that I mentioned. It would also apply to municipally owned services and private companies that don't fall within the jurisdiction of the PUC. So very broad scope. To try to capture all of the potential utilities. And so that's really the substance of the bill. It's a rulemaking procedure to deal with this issue. And it would take effect on passage.
Representative Chestnut.
Thank you, Marin. I thought it was interesting in just the presentation, how many other issues came up. And I'm wondering, is there a standard procedure for notifying management of a property as opposed to the owner or both? Or
I'm not aware of any procedure in the rule. This is not an area that I am really that familiar with on the ground, but the notification, and I can actually send this rule to the committee, so you have it on your webpage and if you want to look at it, but right now the notification is to the ratepayer. So it doesn't talk about who, if the property manager isn't on the bill, that notification might not go to the property manager. So and I think part of having it go through the rulemaking process is to address all of those variabilities for each type of service to the extent there may be differences.
There are landlords or property owners that provide many of the utilities, so the bill is for the house or the bill, when people say heat included, I'm assuming that the account is with that property.
Right.
So that's not a problem.
So they would get the notice.
Right.
Right.
What would be the problem, or perhaps why was it limited, maybe this is a research question if we take the bill up,
Yep.
but to know why it was limited to the ratepayer and not, I mean, we're essentially asking it to be the ratepayer and the owner, if a rental property,
Right.
or a residential rental property, you know, how, we would be asking to extend that. Is there
Yeah.
any general history when utilities have to deal with individual ratepayers versus the larger, you know, the potential for a larger notification?
Yeah, so I don't know. I would have to do more research. And I don't know if it was specifically considered and decided to do a narrower approach or if it just wasn't on the radar to begin with.
Okay.
So, but I can reach out to the PUC.
Yeah, if we go further.
Thank you. Likewise, I wondered whether there was a rule about whether tenants, whether there's a requirement to inform tenants if a utility is going to be shut off.
If the landlord shuts it off.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, so there, that isn't the rule. I know that that's addressed. Let me just, I was actually just looking at that earlier today. In buildings where service to 2 or more units is to be disconnected because of a landlord's request or non-payment, the utility must post the notice in a secure and obvious place on the building. And then it goes on to say, inform the tenant, you know, so that, yeah, so that, I can't read it fast enough. But it captures the gist of just that issue. So the landlord can't make decisions without the tenant, you know, knowing and having an opportunity to, if it's a payment issue, to make the payment or.
Okay, thank you.
You said telecom and such cable type things are exempt from this. It's not considered, it's not a public utility, right? So.
Telecommunications
Like a
is,
satellite company, you know.
yeah, broadband, yeah,
I mean, I just,
Yeah.
years ago, we came across it wasn't similar, except to say that it was about satellite dishes. When I cancel my account, the satellite company doesn't come and take the dish away. And so landlords are stuck with a dish on the side of their house. Who should be
Yeah.
responsible for that? And the dish companies were not ours.
yeah, yeah.
Which a public company, public utility would take responsibility for, but I mean,
Yeah,
different.
yeah, so that's not covered, you're right, it's not covered here.
Representative Krasnow?
Yeah, but, so I guess I'm just trying to understand, so I asked earlier about penalties, so then when this, well, first, so how would tenants know that this exists? Like, if it goes into effect at the date, like, then does everyone have to,
Maybe, let me just clarify, that when
Okay.
I say it goes into effective passage, that's when the PUC initiates its rulemaking process.
okay,
So they would go through rulemaking, which can take maybe 8 months. And that's a public docket, you know, people can participate, there's notice and opportunities. Presumably, it would require some kind of notification,
Right.
right, to the tenants, and the utility would have to find out, are you a renter? If you're a renter, who's the landlord, get the address, so what, that process, you know, presumably will be incorporated in the rule, the final rule.
okay. And then, if I'm a landlord and then I get notified that happens, then it's up to my discretion to then do. Yeah,
So it doesn't specify what should happen, and I think that's part of, you know, make a policy decision about what should happen. So maybe the landlord has a chance to correct the payment or keep the service running, especially if there's potential risk to the property,
right, this is more about safety and being notified that this isn't happening, not about then like a retaliation. It's about safety you know, I think of people, I live in a condo with shared walls, et cetera. I own it, but other people, if it just shut off and then there was something that could affect everyone in the row, you know? Okay, so it's more just about alerting of safety, this is happening, not,
Correct,
got it. Great,
Correct.
thank you.
That's the intent.
correct.
And then the question would be, do we actually need language either in statute or in rule that, I think one point that I heard you getting to is this grounds for eviction?
Right.
And at what level do you say, do we say, yes, this is the grounds for eviction? Or we just have to answer that question if that already exists in law, so.
Thank you.
Representative Elder?
Couldn't such a stipulation be in the landlord's lease? Like, couldn't they say,
Yes.
this is a condition of your lease and, you know, so it would be violation?
Mhm.
I wonder if that kind of stipulation is common.
And I don't know.
And one of the issues in Vermont is that so many leases are verbal. So we have to cover that in statute. And we can cover that in statute, we don't have to. But yes, I think you're right, if there is a written lease, then it could be covered in that. Representative Chestnut?
So earlier the chair mentioned it raised as a potential privacy issue. At first blush, do you see any privacy issues here with the utilities that we're talking about?
I think it's a concern. I think it's balancing the risks of not having the notice against privacy, tenants' privacy, and hopefully the final rule would strike an appropriate balance there.
But there's no obvious, you know, like HIPAA, there's nothing existing that you're aware of.
Not that I'm aware of.
I would imagine that you can notify people without saying why the electricity was turned on, and the heat was turned on, but I mean, that gets into the landlord-tenant relationship.
So I should say, I mean, there may be medical reasons why someone's not making their payment. So in that scenario, there may be a HIPAA issue. I hadn't really actually thought of that till you just kind of thought it through a little bit more, but.
That was to complicate things.
Thank you.
Now, this work is the big what if. What's the worst case scenario?
Right.
All right, Representative Parsons.
Thank you. Well, Representative Page is here, I figured I would ask this. If this was something you had thought of, would it be your intent to say the landlord, property management company should be notified without the reasoning? Or would that come up in your thought process of doing this? Or was it you just gotta let them know, you don't have to tell them why. You just say, shut off on Thursday. And just like, you know.
My reasoning behind this is that maybe the landlord, property manager could step in and maintain, keep the utilities going. Let's face it, disconnecting the utilities is costly. Reconnecting them, there's probably additional costs there. Ultimately, that would save the tenants some money maybe in the long run. So that's what I hope that answers your question.
No, that's
Okay, as we finish, just to be clear, this bill would enable the PUC to create a rule to include this continuation of notice. They may very well study this for 8 months and go, no, we're not going to do a rule for whatever reasons they decide. Is that, I mean, this is enabling the regulatory organization to have the opportunity to determine a rule based on this scenario.
Well, technically, they should do it if you tell them to do it. But hopefully you would hear from them before the end of the session if they felt like there was a real problem. For whatever reason.
Sure.
But no, then they would be responsible for doing the rule. You could enact a statute that requires the same thing if you feel like you're prepared to go through the details and get it to your satisfaction, address all the concerns that have come up. That is absolutely an option.
Okay. All right, anything else for Maria or Representative Page? All right, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you all.
All right, committee, before we go off live, we're just reviewing what our agenda is for this afternoon. We'll be hearing at 1:15, just to give people to, if you're going to the tax agency, to take a break in between. We're gonna hear from Paul Dragon, who is the executive director of CBOEO. We've heard from different people from CBOEO this week. And he's been very active in keeping track of what's going on with hotel issues, with homelessness issues. And so we'll hear from him and then we'll be done for the day. So,
Great.
So thank you. Let's go to lunch.
Oh, hang on.